The last customer had left 20 minutes ago, but Rohan kept wiping down the same spot on the counter, his movements automatic and meditative. Outside, the first drops of rain began pattering against the large windows of Harmony Cafe, each droplet catching the warm amber light from within. The weather forecast had promised a storm, and Rohan could feel it building in the heavy air that pressed against the glass. He paused in his cleaning, letting his gaze drift to the corner booth, where a guitar stood propped against the wall, not for decoration, but close enough to touch whenever the silence became too loud. The cafe had been his sanctuary for 3 years now, a place where broken hearts came for comfort in steaming mugs and fresh pastries. Never knowing their host understood their pain better than most, the rain intensified, drumming a rhythm that stirred memories Rohan usually kept buried. His fingers unconsciously tapped against the counter, following a melody that had died on his lips years ago. Music had once been his language, his dream, his way of speaking to the world. Now it felt like trying to sing underwater, possible, perhaps. But who would hear? Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Rohan glanced at the vintage clock hanging above the espresso machine. Nearly closing time. He should flip the sign, lock up, and retreat to his small apartment upstairs, where the loneliness felt more honest, less like he was pretending to be content. But something kept him moving through his routine, straightening chairs that didn't need straightening, checking supplies that were already checked. The promise he'd made echoed in his mind as clearly as if he'd spoken it yesterday. "I'll stay. Away, Nisha. I swear on everything I hold dear, I'll never come between you and your family's happiness again." It had been the hardest words he'd ever spoken, harder than the goodbye that followed, harder than watching her walk away without looking back. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, not that he was counting. Lightning illuminated the street. Outside, casting stark shadows through the rain-streaked windows, Rohan had chosen this location deliberately far enough from the old neighborhood to avoid accidental encounters, close enough to the university district to ensure steady business from people who didn't know his story. Students cramming for exams, artists seeking inspiration, lovers sharing quiet conversations, they all found refuge here. Never suspecting their sanctuary's keeper was a man who'd learned to make peace with longing. The cafe reflected his soul, warm, welcoming, but carefully controlled. Every detail spoke of someone who understood comfort, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, the mismatched vintage furniture that invited lingering, the menu board written in flowing script that changed daily based on his mood. Regular. Customers often commented on the cafe's unusual name. Rohan would simply smile and say it reminded him that life was like music, full of different melodies that somehow created something beautiful when played together. What he never told them was that Harmony had also been the name of the song he'd written for her, the one that was supposed to be their wedding dance, the melody that still played in his dreams on nights when the loneliness felt too sharp to bear. Another crack of thunder, closer this time, and the lights flickered. Rohan reached under the counter for the emergency candles he kept there, a habit, born from too many power outages in this old building. As he set them on the counter, the warm wax smell mingled with coffee and rain, creating something unexpectedly nostalgic. The storm was arriving exactly as predicted, and Rohan found himself hoping it would be fierce enough to wash away the restlessness that had been building in his chest all week. Sometimes nature's chaos was the only thing loud enough to quiet the thoughts he couldn't escape. He was reaching for the door to flip the close sign when he saw a figure through the rain-distorted glass, hurrying down the sidewalk with no umbrella, no protection against the storm that was just beginning to show its teeth. The bell above the door chimed, just as lightning split the sky. And for a moment Rohan thought the storm had somehow materialized inside his cafe. The figure in the doorway stood silhouetted against the chaos outside, water dripping from dark hair, shoulders shaking, whether from cold or something deeper, he couldn't tell. Then she stepped into the light, and Rohan's world tilted on its axis. Nisha. Her name escaped his lips like a prayer he'd forgotten he knew. She stood there, soaked through, her elegant burgundy dress clinging to her frame. Mascara smudged beneath eyes that held the same storm raging outside. For 3 years, he'd imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways. But none of his fantasies had prepared him for the reality of her presence, how it seemed to fill every corner of his carefully constructed sanctuary. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain hammering against the windows. "I know you're closing. I just, didn't know where else to go." The rational part of Rohan's mind screamed at him to turn her away, to honor the promise that had become his prison. But his heart, the treacherous thing, was already moving his feet forward, already reaching for the towel behind the counter. "You're freezing," he said, the words coming out rougher than intended. "Sit down, please." Nisha hesitated at the threshold, as if crossing into the cafe might break some invisible barrier between their past and present. Water pooled at her feet, and Rohan noticed her hands trembling as she pushed wet strands of hair from her face. She looked older not in years, but in the way people looked when life had taught them lessons they'd never wanted to learn. "The storm caught me," she said. They both knew storms didn't explain why someone ended up 20 miles from where they belonged. In a cafe owned by the man they'd once promised to forget, Rohan draped the towel over her shoulders, careful not to let their skin touch. Though the space between them seemed to hum with electricity more dangerous than the lightning outside. "Coffee? Tea? Something stronger?" "Just coffee. Black." Her voice steadied, but her eyes avoided his. "I don't want to be any trouble." Trouble. The word hung between them like smoke. If she only knew that she'd been trouble for his peace of mind. Every single day since she'd walked away, that her absence had been a constant ache he'd learned to carry, like an old injury that predicted storms as he moved to prepare her coffee. Muscle memory guiding his hands, Rohan stole glances at her. Reflection in the espresso machine's chrome surface. She sat at the counter now, the towel wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring at her phone with an expression he couldn't read. The device buzzed insistently, but she made no move to answer it.
"Rohan?"
she said suddenly, and hearing his name in her voice was like being struck by lightning twice in one night. "This place, ... It's beautiful. It suits you." He set the coffee cup before her, noting how her fingers wrapped around it like an anchor. "It's quiet, peaceful. Everything I thought I wanted." "Thought you wanted?" Their eyes met for the first time since she'd entered, and Rohan felt the familiar pull, the gravitational force that had always existed between them. 3 years had done nothing to diminish it. If anything, absence had made it stronger, more dangerous. "It's enough," he corrected, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. Nisha's phone buzzed again, the sound sharp against the steady percussion of rain. This time she looked at the screen, and something in her expression cracked. Without thinking, she declined the call and set the phone face down on the counter. "Arjun?" Rohan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "My fiancé." The word hit him like a physical blow, even though he'd known it was coming. He'd heard through mutual acquaintances, seen the announcement in the society pages of the newspaper he'd trained himself not to read but couldn't quite give up. Arjun Malhotra, successful lawyer, good family, everything Nisha's parents had wanted for her from the beginning. "When's the wedding?" he managed to ask, his voice carefully neutral. "Day after tomorrow." The words came out barely above a whisper. "The rehearsal dinner is tonight." Was tonight? Rohan's coffee cup win? Had he poured himself coffee? Stopped halfway to his lips. "You left your rehearsal dinner?" Nisha laughed, but there was no humor in it, only a brittle edge that spoke of barely controlled hysteria. "I excused myself to powder my nose and just ... kept walking. Through the hotel lobby, out into the rain, to my car. I drove without thinking until I ended up here." The implications of her words settled over them like a heavy blanket. She was getting married in less than 48 hours, and instead of celebrating with her future husband and their families, she was sitting in his cafe, soaked to the skin and looking like a woman drowning on dry land. "Nisha," he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I know what you're going to say. That I should go back, that I'm making a mistake being here, that we made a promise."
"Oh."
Her voice grew stronger, steadier.
But
tonight, Rohan, I just need to sit somewhere that feels real, just for a little while." Outside, the storm raged on, and inside, Two people who had promised to stay apart sat across from each other, separated by 3 years and a counter, connected by something that time and distance had proven powerless to break. Asterisk. The power went out just as Nisha was taking her first sip of coffee, plunging them into darkness broken only by the intermittent flash of lightning. Rohan moved with practiced ease, lighting the candles he'd prepared earlier, their warm glow, transforming the cafe into something intimate and otherworldly. "This happens often?" Nisha asked, watching him work. In the candlelight, the sharp edges of exhaustion on her face softened, and for a moment she looked like the girl he'd once known, the one who used to steal his guitar and make up silly songs just to hear him laugh. Every few months, the building's old, the wiring older. He settled back behind the counter, the candles creating a barrier of light between them. "I've gotten used to it." "You've gotten used to a lot of things, haven't you?" There was something in her voice, not quite accusation, but close. "Living alone, running this place by yourself, pretending the past doesn't exist." Rohan's jaw tightened. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm moving forward, like you told me to." "Like I told you to." Nisha set down her cup with more force than necessary. "Rohan, you're the one who made the promise. You're the one who said you'd disappear from my life, because your family made it clear I wasn't welcome. Because your father threatened to disown you if you didn't end things with me, because he stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. 3 years and the anger was still there, buried but not forgotten. Because of what Vikram told them," Nisha finished quietly. The name hung between them like a curse. Vikram, Rohan's best friend since childhood, the one person who'd known about their secret relationship before anyone else. The same person who'd eventually betrayed that trust in the cruelest way possible. "You know what he said wasn't true," Rohan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know, I know." Her interruption was swift, fierce. "I've always known. But by the time I could make anyone listen, you were already gone. You'd already decided that keeping your promise to stay away was more important than fighting. For us, thunder crashed overhead, so close, the windows rattled. In the flickering candlelight, Rohan could see tears tracking down Nisha's cheeks, though her voice remained steady. "Do you know what the worst part was?" she continued. "Not the lies Vikram told my parents about you having debts, about you using me to get to my family's money, not even watching you pack up your life and disappear without a word. It was realizing that you believed I wasn't worth fighting for." "It's not," Rohan started, but she wasn't finished. "I waited, Rohan. For months, I waited for you to call, to text, to show up at my door and tell me we could figure it out together. Instead, I got silence. Complete, deafening silence." The pain in her voice was like a knife twisting in his chest. He'd thought his sacrifice had been noble, that walking away had been the ultimate act of love. Instead, he'd broken the very thing he'd been trying to protect. "Your sister knew," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Nisha's head snapped up. "What?" "Mira. She knew the truth about Vikram's lies. She came to see me the night before I left." The memory was still sharp after all these years. Mira's tear-stained face, her desperate pleas for him to stay and fight. "She begged me not to go, said you were falling apart, that you needed me to come home. Mira never told me." Nisha's voice was hollow with shock. "All these years she never said anything. I asked her not to. I thought," he laughed bitterly, "I thought I was being noble. Thought your family would be happier without me complicating things. Thought you'd eventually realize you were better off." "Better off?" Nisha stood abruptly, pacing to the window where rain lashed against the glass like tears. "Do you want to know what happened after you left? My father finally got his wish. I stopped seeing the unsuitable musician and focused on finding someone appropriate. Arjun was the third man my parents introduced me to. He's kind, successful, everything they wanted for me." She pressed her palm against the cold glass, her reflection ghost-like in the window. "And I said yes to his proposal because I was tired of fighting, tired of hoping, tired of loving someone who decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Nisha, the invitations went out 3 months ago. It's 500 guests, most of whom I've never met. The dress costs more than your cafe probably makes in 6 months. My mother cries with joy every time someone tells her how perfect Arjun and I are together. She turned back to face him, and in the candlelight, he could see the woman she'd become stronger, sadder, but still achingly beautiful. And through all of it, through every dress fitting and venue tours and menu tasting, all I could think about was you. About the songs you used to write for me. About the way you'd play guitar while I cooked. Dinner in your tiny apartment. About how we used to talk for hours about the life we'd build together. The candle flames danced in the silence that followed, casting shifting shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating. I dream about you, Rohan admitted, his voice raw, almost every night. I wake up and for just a moment, I forget you're not there anymore. This cafe, this whole life, it's just elaborate pretending. Nisha moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume beneath the rain. Then why didn't you fight for me? Why did you let them win? Because I loved you too much to watch you lose everything for me. The truth hung between them like a bridge. Neither was sure they should cross. Your family, your future, your security couldn't be the reason you lost all of that. But what if I wanted to lose it? She whispered. What if I would have chosen you anyway? The question hung in the air between them like smoke from the flickering candles. Rohan stared at Nisha, seeing not the polished woman in the expensive dress, but the girl who used to sneak out of her parents' house to meet him at midnight, who danced barefoot in his apartment to songs he'd written just for her. Don't, he whispered, his voice breaking. Don't ask me to imagine a different ending when you're getting married tomorrow. Day after tomorrow, she corrected, stepping closer until only the counter separated them. And I'm not asking you to imagine anything. I'm telling you what I would have chosen, what I still would choose. Her phone buzzed again on the counter, Arjun's name lighting up the screen. This time, neither of them looked at it. The sound seemed to come from another world, another life that felt increasingly distant with each passing moment. You remember what you told me the night before everything fell apart? Nisha's voice was soft now, almost hypnotic in the candlelight. You said that music was just organized sound until someone gave it meaning. That we were like that, just two separate people until we found our harmony. Rohan's throat tightened. He remembered. It had been one of those perfect evenings when the future seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of them, full of possibility and promise. They'd been lying on his couch, her head on his chest, planning their someday wedding, their someday house, their someday children. I remember, he managed. Mira found me yesterday, Nisha continued, moving around the counter now, eliminating the last physical barrier between them. She said she couldn't let me go through with the wedding without telling me the truth. About Vikram's lies, about your visit, about everything. Rohan's breath caught. What did she tell you? That you came to the house the morning after Vikram spread his poison? That you stood outside for 3 hours in the range, just like tonight, waiting for me to come home? That when I finally did, my father had already convinced me you'd been using me all along. The memory was a knife in his chest. He'd stood there, soaked through, watching through the window as Nisha's father showed her what looked like evidence of his supposed debts. His supposed scheme to marry into wealth. Vikram had been thorough in his betrayal, crafting lies that played perfectly into her family's worst fears about him. I saw you through the window, he admitted. Saw the way you looked at those papers, the way your face changed. I knew then that I'd already lost you. You hadn't lost me. Tears streamed down her face now, catching the candlelight like liquid gold. I was confused, hurt, but I still loved you. I came outside to find you, to hear your side, but you were already gone. I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't stand there and watch you stop loving me in real time. Nisha reached across the small space between them, her fingers finding his face, tracing the lines that 3 years had carved there. I never stopped loving you, Rohan. Not for a single day. Even when I hated you for leaving, even when I said yes to Arjun's proposal, even when I was standing at the altar during our engagement ceremony, was always you. The words shattered something inside him, some careful wall he'd built to protect himself from this exact moment. His hands found her waist, and suddenly she was in his arms, and 3 years of separation collapsed into nothing. "We can't," he whispered against her hair, even as his body betrayed him by holding her closer. "You're getting married? You have a life? A future planned? A future I never wanted," she interrupted, pulling back to look at him. "Do you know what I said when Arjun proposed?" Said yes. But in my head I was saying your name. At every wedding planning meeting, every venue tour, every dress fitting, I kept thinking, this should be Rohan. This should be us. Asterisk. Outside, the storm seemed to be reaching its peak, wind howling around the building like a living thing. But inside their bubble of candlelight, the only sound was their breathing, quick and uneven. "Mira told me something else," Nisha said, her hand still framing his face. "About the song you were writing for me. The one you never finished." Rohan's eyes closed. "Nisha, please." She said you told her it was called Promise Me Forever, that you were going to sing it at our wedding. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. "Play it for me." "I can't." "Why?" "Because I never finished it. Because the ending we planned never happened." He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. "Because if I play that song for you now, I won't be strong enough to let you walk away again." The admission hung between them, raw and honest and dangerous. Nisha's phone buzzed once more, then fell silent, as if even Arjun could sense this. Moment was bigger than his claims on her. "Then don't let me walk away," she whispered. "Fight for me this time. Fight for us." Thunder cracked overhead so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. In its aftermath, the silence felt charged with possibility. With the weight of a choice that would change everything, Rohan looked at the woman in his arms. The woman he'd loved since they were barely more than children, the woman he'd given, up to protect the woman who was asking him to choose love over duty, passion over propriety, their imperfect truth over everyone else's perfect lies. "If I fight for you," he said slowly, "there's no going back. Your family will disown you. Your life as you know it will be over. Without the wedding, the guests, the future you've built with Arjun, all of it will be gone." "It's already gone," she said. "Simply, it never really existed. It was just a beautiful lie I told myself to survive without you." The candles flickered as if responding to the intensity of the moment, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, two people stood on the precipice of a decision that would either damn them both or finally, after 3 years of separation and sorrow, set them free. Rohan's answer came not in words, but in the way he reached for his guitar. The instrument felt foreign in his hands after months of silence. But as his fingers found the familiar strings, muscle memory took over. The first notes of Promise Me Forever filled the candlelit cafe, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Nisha's breath caught as the melody she'd only heard in fragments years ago finally revealed itself completely. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, a song that spoke of infinite tomorrows and promises carved in starlight. But as Rohan played, she realized something that made her heart ache even more. The song was finished. "It had been finished all along." "You lied," she whispered, when the last note faded. "You did finish it." Rohan set the guitar aside, his eyes never leaving her face. "I finished it the night you got engaged to Arjun. I saw the announcement in the paper and sat down and wrote an ending. I never thought I'd get to play for you." "What's the ending?" Instead of answering, he pulled her close and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and regret, and 3 years of buried love finally surfacing. It was a kiss that said what words couldn't, that some promises were meant to be broken, that some fights were worth having, that some love stories were too powerful to end with sacrifice and silence. When they broke apart, both breathless, the storm outside had begun to quiet. The worst of it had passed, leaving only steady rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. "My phone's been buzzing for hours," Nisha said, though she made no move to check it. "Arjun, my parents, probably half the wedding party wondering where I disappeared to. What are you going to tell them?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "The truth. That I can't marry someone when I'm in love with someone else. That I'd rather disappoint them than live a lie for the rest of my life." "Your brother Karen will understand," Rohan said, remembering the younger man who'd always been more progressive than the rest of her family. He never liked the arrangement anyway. No, he didn't. He told me I was settling. She laughed, but it was shaky. Turns out little brothers sometimes know things older sisters refuse to see. The candles had burned lower, casting longer shadows as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the windows. They'd talked through the entire night, laying bare 3 years of hurt and misunderstanding, rebuilding the foundation of trust that Vikram's lies had shattered. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," Rohan admitted. "But not of your family's anger or the gossip or even starting over. I'm scared of waking up and finding out this was just another dream." Nisha took his hand, interlacing their fingers. "And don't wake up. Stay in this moment with me." As if summoned by her words, her phone rang, not buzzed, but rang with the insistent tone of someone who wouldn't be ignored. The caller ID showed her mother's number. "I have to take this," she said, but her grip on his hand tightened. "Will you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Not this time." She answered the call, and immediately her mother's frantic voice filled the air. Rohan couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Panic, anger, desperation. Nisha listened for several minutes before speaking. "Mama, I need you to listen to me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm coming back to the hotel tonight, and tomorrow I'm not getting married." The explosion of sound from the phone was immediate and intense. Nisha held it slightly away from her ear, waiting for the storm to pass. When it finally quieted, she continued, "I know you don't understand. I know you think I'm throwing my life away, but I'm not, Mama. I'm finally choosing the life I actually want to live." More protests, more pleading, but Nisha's resolve didn't waver. When she finally ended the call, she looked emotionally drained but somehow lighter, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally been lifted. "How do you feel?" Rohan asked. "Free," she said simply. "Terrified and probably about to become the family disappointment, but free." The rain had stopped while they weren't paying attention, and the first real sunlight in hours streamed through the cafe windows, turning the raindrops on the glass into prisms. The storm was over. "So what happens now?" Nisha asked, moving to stand at the window. Oh, the street outside looked washed clean, everything bright and new in the morning light. Rohan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Now we write a new song, start a new story. Figure out how to build a life together that's ours, not anyone else's version of what our life should be." "It won't be easy," she warned. "My family won't forgive this quickly. There'll be consequences." "Let them come," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We've already survived 3 years apart. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Nisha leaned back against him, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Somewhere across town, wedding preparations would continue without a bride. Somewhere, a good man named Arjun would have his heart broken. Somewhere, families would rage and gossip would fly, and the carefully ordered world they'd tried to escape would continue spinning. But here, in this small cafe where broken hearts came for comfort, 2 people who'd found their way back to each other stood watching the dawn break over their second chance. The promise that had kept them apart was broken, placed by a new one whispered against rain-soaked hair in the candlelit dark, sealed with a kiss that tasted of forever. "Promise me forever," Nisha whispered, echoing the song's title. Forever. Rohan promised back, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Outside, the world was washed clean and waiting. Inside, love had finally won. The storm was over. Their real story was just beginning. Asterisk.